We are back. That's right. We are back to movie reviews by Dr. B and
Mrs. B.
And we are parents of 3 adult children.
Children who are adults.
Children who are adults. And we are also persons of color, and we are also baby boomers. That's baby right. Boomers. And I'm an anthropologist, and she's a
independent artist scholar.
There you go. There you go. And we are going to get down to some serious review of 2 movies, Lincoln and Amistad. That's right, Lincoln and Amistad. Both directed by Steven Spielberg.
Steven Spielberg.
Wow, now these are some heavy movies, Mrs. B.
Very serious movies. And it's been a long time coming. We've always talked about these movies after every time we've watched them. And to get a chance to review them is even all the more honorable for us to do. So I'm glad you're here and happy that we're able to present our discussion and movie review on Lincoln and La Amistad.
Yes, Lincoln came out in 2012 and Amistad in 1997. And I'm going to read the start with Lincoln and read the script or the overview of Lincoln, because this gets down to some serious stuff, y'all. Okay, we're going to go there on this one. So here's the release from Steven Spielberg's website, by the way. In the final 4 months of Abraham Lincoln's life and presidency, the full measure of the man, his passion, and his humanity came to bear on his defining battle to plot a forward path for a shattered nation against overwhelming odds and extreme public and personal pressure. Steven Spielberg's Lincoln provides an intimate immersion into the American leader's most perilous and revealing moments at a time when the dark shadow of slavery lifts and a country torn by war must be made whole. A rich human drama plays out as Lincoln doubles down to end the devastating Civil War, not merely by ending the war, but by fighting to pass the 13th Amendment, permanently abolishing slavery. It will be an act of true national daring. He will have to call upon all the skill, courage, and moral fortitude for which he'll become legendary. He will grapple with the impact of his actions on the world and on those he loves. But what lies in the balance is what always mattered most to Lincoln: to compel the American people and those in his government of opposite persuasions to alter course and aim higher toward a greater good for all mankind. Brought to life via a layered screenplay by Pulitzer Prize winner Tony Kushner, Spielberg starkly human storytelling in the performance of Daniel Day-Lewis, who received an Oscar for this, y'all. Leading an accomplished cast, the film invites audiences directly into the heart and the soul of Lincoln's final achievements. Wow, just that description, that sets the scene. And so, what do you think about that, Mrs. B?
Well, as I was watching it, first of all, Daniel Day-Lewis is superb, excellent. So was Sally Field.
Yes, Sally Field was Mrs. Lincoln's wife.
Mrs. Lincoln.
Played Mrs. Lincoln's Sally Field. You know Sally Field, the Flying Nun, had her own series, The Flying Nun, back in the 60s.
Lighthearted.
Yes.
Yes. I love that. I loved her in The Flying Nun. Oh, it was wonderful. But, what I thought about it, well, I kind of wrote a little bit about it. If
Go right ahead.
It says, Lincoln is a stellar masterpiece of historical presidential proportions, of real political figures larger than life. And, Spielberg is a masterful job anyway. Just the numerous amount of masterpieces Spielberg has created is just phenomenal, excellent, superior. And looking at the cast, cast of Sally Fields and Tommy Lee Jones and David Stratham and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and James Spader.
Okay.
And I'm just going to speak to a few of the actors. Wonderful job. And I just want to also say that as I was looking through it, the story begins with Lincoln in the White House as an American soldiers, talking as with the American soldiers. He's out on the field, the battlefield, speaking with the soldiers. And this, and from my perspective, as he was speaking, he was talking about the South and the North fight for the nation.
Let me just interject. He was speaking to the soldiers, but he was speaking to the black soldiers.
That's what
that was different. He was speaking to the black soldiers, and that was just very gripping. Go right ahead.
Oh yeah, he's speaking to the black soldiers and American Civil War. Elegant and learned men of U.S. Congress, sharply divided over principles and values, and mostly over slavery. This is what this is about: emancipation, a proclamation. And as the books I read about Lincoln, not only he sees that slavery must come to an end, and for also other reasons as well, but the South is adamant about not really realizing the moral injustice of slavery, and as I went through it, they're afraid, if these people from that are enslaved, these African Americans, once they're released, these black folks, once they're enslaved and they're released, what is going to happen to them? It's almost a selfish thing as well.
But let me just say this: in the movie, they were the black soldiers were contemplating how much they want to give their lives up to the Union, because again, they knew that they were not going to be treated well after the fight. So there was quandary, there was confusion, there was not all together in fighting this fight for the Union. And so in the scene, Lincoln, Daniel Day-Lewis, had to convince these soldiers this is a worthy cause.
Yes, and they asked great questions. They're like, what am I going to do here? The soldiers don't have boots. I don't have the equal boots or uniform as the rest of the white soldiers.
Yeah.
And so that conversation was poignant. He was sitting there on the table there, and he's talking to these soldiers, and he's very personable in conversation, and he's talking about real life. And he's talking about death and dying, and he's answering their questions as if he's one of the soldiers with them. And I thought that was really masterful. It's really poignant because he's sitting there understanding how they feel and what they're going through. The opposite of that,
he's doing his best to understand. He didn't really understand. He was doing his best. Yes. Not that he truly knew, because he was the president. He was the leader, but he was trying to do his best to understand what the black soldiers were going through, and it was very graphic. Let me just say, it was very graphic of the war, the killing, the soldiers, the dead soldiers, and I really appreciate that Steven Spielberg brought the reality to the scene. So it was the battlefield. These were some serious, major killings between the Union and the Confederates. And let me just say before we move on about this was, and I'm really glad that Lincoln, Daniel Day-Lewis, and he was challenged even by Sally Field, his wife, because his wife didn't even want him to go this far to push this 13th Amendment, and then he had to challenge his own son, his older son, and all of this, but he was fighting for freedom.
Well, yes, he was fighting for freedom. And then the thing that I want to bring up is the opposing side of going into war as they start the Civil War through the South, and the North conquers the South, and emancipation occurs. As he's going through the war, the opposing part of that was very poignant at the end, and we'll get to that later, is him
wrapping it up. We got to move on.
Walking through the battlefield, and all this death and destruction is happening, all these bodies, and he's walking through, and he's looking at this, and that was, a feeling that you have to watch the film to understand how that feels, how that would feel walking through this death and destruction. And it's a war, and both lost on both sides, but freedom and moral justice had to win. Slavery had to end. And I want to speak to the First Lady, Mrs. Lincoln. Mrs. Lincoln, going through this, her role, Sally Field's excellent job, her role at that time period rivaled any first lady, dealing with a civil war, dealing with slavery, becoming slavery and citizens becoming free citizens. Her home, fighting with Congress on the White House budget, which she needed in order to build the White House, to bring it back to architecture, and going through that, and then having loss and grief of family. And then on top of all of that, having to deal with the nervousness of it, both of them losing family members, and the nervous condition she had. They tried to make it seem as if, she had, some depression here, depression there. But to me, that was just stress. She's going through all this stress, loss of life, soldiers being killed on the North and South. And then her husband making this serious decision. And then in her own life, dealing with the world of a first lady, having to get a budget in order to uplift the White House. It's architecture. It's American history. That's a lot for any first lady to go through.
No doubt.
And war.
And no doubt. And that's what was the challenge of that was happening with the first lady. And then Lincoln was trying to get the votes to get the 13th Amendment passed. And then when it eventually passed, it was true freedom.
Yes.
Not symbolic freedom, but true freedom for all blacks at that time. And the exhilaration of that, to get to that point in time, knowing that this is going to truly divide the country even more so. And he just said, I got to do what's right for the country and for everyone else. So that kind of wraps up.
It wraps up because it's a moral story too.
It's a very moral story.
It's a freedom story. It's a civil rights. It's a human rights story. And not only that, once the Emancipation Proclamation became law, and the slaves of American slaves, African Americans, blacks were set free, mulattoes set free, then you had Juneteenth, the last place where they were set free. It's how people still celebrate today. And so all I can say is, I wouldn't even say over, just half my ancestors, if it wasn't for the Emancipation Proclamation, and I can say that for myself, but in our family, as Dr. B and Mrs. B, half of our ancestors wouldn't be free today. We wouldn't be free. And that is something that we have to seriously think about and reflect on. And the younger generation should be grateful for. Excellent job, Mr. Spielberg, and the producers and directors and the cast of Lincoln. Thank you.
Very good. And now we move on to Amistad. We only have a few more minutes. We're going to move on to Amistad. See, that's how we roll here. We got to do a wrap-up one and then move on to the next series. And this was a extremely important movie, of which we feel that it needed to be reviewed. Go right ahead, Mrs. B.
All right. Well, let's get right on into La Amistad. Sinke, give us free. And that's what we're talking about right here in America today. After white supremacy rising up and racism and hate groups. Oh my goodness. We don't need any of those types of behaviors and mentality. So this movie, both movies are very important. And I will read the release date, December 10th, 1997 of Amistad. And cited from the Steven Spielberg website. Don't get a tongue twister there. Freedom is not given. It is our right at birth. But there are moments when it must be taken. In the summer of 1839, on a stormy night off the coast of Cuba, 53 Africans held captive in the cramped cargo holds of the Spanish slave ship La Amistad break free of their shackles. Led by Sinke Digimon Hunsu, they arm themselves, take control of the ship, and reclaim their freedom. They have one goal: to return to Africa. Without navigational skills to guide them home, the Africans are forced to rely on 2 surviving members of the crew. But they are tricked. After 2 months on a ragged course up the eastern seaboard, the Amistad is captured by an American naval ship off the coast of Long Island, and the Africans charged with murder and piracy. In the beginning, the Africans are championed by abolitionists Theodore Judson, played by actor Morgan Freeman, and Lewis Tappan, played by Stellan Skarsgård, and the young real estate attorney named Roger Baldwin, played by Matthew McConaughey. However, as the case becomes the symbol of a nation divided, two great Americans lock horns in the debate. Pro-slavery President Martin Van Buren, Nigel Hawthorne, seeking re-election, is willing to sacrifice the Africans to appease the South, as well as Queen Isabella of Spain, played by Anna Paquin. But his will is challenged by former President John Quincy Adams, Anthony Hopkins, who comes out of retirement to fight the Africans' cause in the United States Supreme Court. Directed by Steven Spielberg and featuring an international ensemble cast including David Paymer, Pete Postlethwaite from The Lost World Jurassic Park, and Stellan Skarsgård. Amistad is written by David Franzoni and produced by Steven Spielberg. Debbie Allen, who brought the project to Spielberg after she saw Schindler's List, and Colin Wilson, among a list of mentioning Janusz Kaminski, cinematographer, Rick Carter, production designer, Michael Kahn, editor, and John Williams, of course, composer. Mr. John Williams. That is the beginning of Amistad, and of the definition and the release description about the movie. And you should see it, both movies. Dr. Bailey, Dr. B, could you please tell me what you think about La Amistad?
Are you done?
I am done.
Okay, that was long. We only have a few minutes.
Yes.
And I want to make sure I stay on time. I just thought the movie was, again, very graphic. Steven Spielberg showed how the Africans were transported in the ships, how they were in the gullies, down below, chained, and had to make a long journey. And matter of fact, there was a time where the people on the ship, the persons in charge, they said they have too many slaves. They threw the slaves off, over 100 or so slaves.
Yeah.
Threw with a big rock, and it was over 100 slaves. Seemed like, I don't know, it just seemed slave after slave after. That was very graphic. That was very graphic.
It was graphic, and
it showed the reality of the situation.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed the lead actor who took charge, stood up for what he had to do, Cinque, and he did a phenomenal job of acting. And of course, I have to give a shout out to Matthew McConaughey. He surprised me. My boy Matthew McConaughey. He stood up. He stood up. He brought the style points back then. Matthew McConaughey brought it up. And then let me just say, Anthony Hopkins. My gosh, being in the role of John Quincy Adams, he was a bit older in character. As a matter of fact, he was barely functionable. But when Matthew McConaughey asked him politely to defend this case for him, and Anthony Hopkins, John Quincy Adams, did a spectacular job.
Oh, yes.
Spectacular job. And the reason why he won the case is that he listened to Cinque, and he said, I listened to Cinque, and it was his words that won the jury over. The highest court, the Supreme Court. He said, I just listened to Cinque. He spent time with Cinque. He did. And that was a great interaction.
That was interaction, because first he didn't want to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Nothing. And then because they had an interpreter there, the actor, which is just wonderful, and played 12 years a slave. So the actor, yes, I believe. And he kept coming back and forth. So this, ebb and flow, going back and forth. Does this amendment fit? What do you think about this question? How many questions can you have? So he's interpreting us back and forth. He's interpreting it. And then finally, Anthony Hopkins, as John and Quincy Adams says, president says, no, I won't answer any more questions. No, 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 no. You know, come over here and let me speak to you. Let me talk to you as a person. And that was a breakthrough. I think so. Because then he began to speak to them. I don't know much about you. Just like was in Lincoln. I don't know much about your folks, your people. I know that you work in our houses. You serve us. But let me know who you are. The person you are. Let me know the human being you are. The individual you are.
And that's where it came together. What it is. And he brought Cinque's values, his beliefs, his history,
not slaves,
his people,
persons,
people
human beings,
to the forefront.
Exactly.
And that's how he won the case. And let me just say, with Anthony Hopkins being nominated for outstanding for Oscar then in 1997, yes. And he just happened to win Oscar today in 2021 for a role. So Anthony Hopkins is still bringing it.
Yes, Anthony Hopkins, Mr. Hopkins is. I forgot to mention that Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor for Lincoln earlier.
Yes, I
as well that. As production and design was excellent, wonderful. And the costumes, the scene, the sets, rich in color and fabrics. Wonderful. Thank you.
So yes. There's our movie reviews. What do you give? Do you give a thumbs up or thumbs up? Come on, Mrs. Bay.
It's a thumbs up.
It's a thumbs up. Okay.
And I just want to make a statement.
Thumbs up.
Modern slavery. This is thumbs up for this. But modern slavery is never okay, whether it's past or present. Human trafficking, modern slavery is never okay anywhere in the world, and still going on into the future, correcting the wrongs of past slavery, American slavery, immoral, unjust, and not right at all. So we want to correct that, and they're still going into the future of how to remedy that.
There
as
is
we
no
speak
doubt
in
about
Congress.
that, Mrs. B. There is no doubt
Modern
about
slavery.
That. So those are our reviews, and those are
is unacceptable.
Individual comments from Mrs. B. and my interjection from Dr. B. So with that said, I am Dr. B.
And I'm Mrs. B.
And I'm an anthropologist and...
And I'm an independent artist scholar.
Yeah, she's an independent artist scholar. BFA, y'all. Get it right. BFA.
PhD.
Yeah, we all know
folks.
that. Okay, so let's get it right. And we're just going to continue to have fantastic fun on these shows, Mrs. B.
Dr. B, I concur.
Yay! We agreed!
Oh my goodness.
We agree. Thank you, everyone. We agreed, and we agreed on the review. So thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. And please turn into our show again. I am Dr. B.
And I'm Mrs. B.
We out, y'all.